Hello everybody, you listen to J Movie Talk episode 336, and Mayaction Month is continuing with this episode as I will be talking about 2007's The Condemned, this early mid-2000s, straight up wild action movie. And I figured, what would be a better time to talk about this movie than for the month of May and Mayaction Month. Quick rundown of this movie is basically you have 10 death row inmates that get dropped on an island for a live stream fight to the death, right? And this movie stars Stone Cold Steve Austin, Vinnie Jones, Rick Offerman. Also, ironically enough, you have this guy who I will refer to as alt-world Steven Jackson, black dude named Marcus Johnson, who looks like former NBA player Steven Jackson to me. So when I refer to him as Steven Jackson, that's who I'm talking about. If you have not seen this movie, it is streaming. I know for a fact it's on Prime. I actually own the movie, but it is on Prime Video if you haven't seen it and everything. And it was directed by Scott Whipper, who, as I look at his credits here as a director, The Condemned was actually his third movie, that he actually did. He did his first directed film, came out in 1995, a movie called Captain Jack. Never heard of it. Then in 2000, he did A Better Way to Die, another movie I've never really heard of. And then 2007, he does The Condemned. 2013, he does The Marine 3. 2020, he does The Big Ugly. And yeah, so far that is all the films that he's directed. And it's ironic, probably his two biggest movies are actually WWE produced films, which is kind of interesting because this movie is the movie that kind of got the WWE film studio kind of up and running, because their first film, which came out way back in 1989, a little movie called No Holds Barred, which starred some guy named Hulk Hogan, who we don't really talk about Hulk Hogan anymore, at least not on this podcast. We don't talk about him, but for this episode, his name will be said a few times, at least in the next few minutes, and everything. Ironically enough, episode 1 of Movie Talk, I actually reviewed No Holds Barred with my former co-host, one Miss Keita Hubbard. That was the first movie that was reviewed on this here podcast way back when, and everything. So it's kind of ironic here for episode 336. So 335 episodes later, I am doing my second WWE produced movie, and everything. And it's kind of, like I say, it's kind of wild how this movie, not only did it get WWE film studios kind of up and going, Steve Austin at that particular point in time, he had made the transition into acting, and everything. He had done before he retired from wrestling, he got into acting, because I honestly remember when he showed up he was making guest appearances on Nash Bridges, which came out, it was on CBS TV series, which starred Don Johnson and Cheech Marin, and he played a character on there named Jake Cage, and he was a bounty hunter. And it's funny, he never used a gun or anything, but he always had this damn briefcase. And anytime, he got into a scramble, it was always, "Where's my briefcase?" Type of thing. And like I said, he had been in movies already, whatnot. He would go on to be in The Expendables a few years after this, But around this time, like I say, he was making his transition into movies, and people kind of forget, Steve Austin actually does have, a straight to DVD or straight to streaming, action, hero, action star, run or whatever. But this was a big movie. I actually saw this movie at the movie theater, and everything back in 2007. And like I say, I always kind of have a soft spot for this movie. I don't know how everyone else might feel about this movie, but I kind of have a soft spot for it and everything. So I know one of the biggest comparisons with this movie is the fact that this movie is very similar-ish to Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Running Man, and also a movie that came out in the early 2000s, a little movie called Battle Royale. If you've never seen Battle Royale, if you can find it, I highly recommend checking it out. That movie is insane, and all I would say is that movie lives up to the Michael Jordan meme of fuck them kids. Well, that movie is a prime example of that. Like I said, it's a wild, insane movie, and it's just kind of crazy how in this particular movie, the twist is basically you get, not only do you have these people that are fighting to the death and for survival on this island, but the fact that it is being live streamed around the world by this, I almost want to say Vince McMahon-ish type character, and everything. But it's basically reality TV exploitation, and it's kind of ahead of the curve of what reality TV was becoming and what it is somewhat now, and how everything is, streaming and, streaming culture. It's a real thing. I mean, you have your Twitch, your TikToks, and, everything like that. Just streaming has become a huge part of society now. But back in 2007, it was fairly newish and kind of finding its footing. I mean, you had a lot of reality TV shows back in the day. Of course, Survivor, and things like that were around, but nothing to the extent of where we are now, where you can literally go on Twitch. For anyone who has a Twitch, you follow people on Twitch, you can go on Twitch and you can see just countless, live streams and everything. So is this kind of far-fetched in 2007, this whole premise? Yeah. But in 2025, is it possible that we could have something like this actually happen? I'm going to say yes, it's something that could actually happen, and everything. Now, would it get, all the way through? That's a whole different thing, but you never know. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that's been going on. So is it out of the realm of possibility? No, it's not. And also too, I mean, this movie is a movie that you don't really have to think too much about. I mean, it is violent. I mean, there's a few fight scenes throughout the movie that are pretty good, and everything. Austin gets to showcase, a lot of his physicality, of him being, a wrestler, and he actually do a few moves in it that kind of make you remember him in the ring, for the most part. You got alt-world Steven Jackson, who is somewhat comic relief, but at the same time, it is messed up what happened to his character. Old girl didn't really have to do him like that. And anytime I watch it, it's like, damn, she really set your ass up. But what did you expect? You on an island with people that are trying to survive. So she used her skills so she could survive, and you just happen to be her victim. And it's ironic, this chick that's in this movie, she actually does take out a few people. She really does. I mean, the one dude at the beginning, she takes him out when they first get to the island and everything, and then she take out Steven Jackson. So yeah, she was actually pretty damn resourceful and everything. And in a wild way, I don't know if they were doing this on purpose or if it's become a happy accident as time has gone on. But this movie is kind of saying something about, you know, TV, reality TV, streaming, culture, uh, things that entertain the public. At what extent are you just everything is just sheer entertainment? It doesn't matter that these people, are literally dying. Like they're not. Oh, it's not fake. It's like no, when somebody get blowed up, they really dying in the movie, and everything. Or when they're first, dropping off the inmates onto this island, and there's one dude that just yelling and just a freaking madman, and he gets tossed out, and he doesn't make it. He's the first victim, and he's not killed by any of the other quote unquote contestants. He's killed because he gets tossed out of the helicopter and he gets impaled and everything. And it's just like, it's insanity. It's like right off the bat, yeah, oops, type of thing. And like I said, I mentioned earlier, Battle Royale, Running Man, but you could almost say also that this movie, in comparisons to like Death Race, Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme, which I actually reviewed a while back on the podcast, and it is somewhat a precursor to what we get with the Hunger Games. And now you have a whole Hunger Games universe, basically. You got the regular, series, and then you have the prequels now and everything. It's become a whole universe or whatever. But this movie, is one of the movies that kind of helped pave the way for, or also falls into that, that little subgenre of movies like this, and everything. So I did talk about Steve Austin a little while, but let's go back to good old Stone Cold as the main character, old Jack Conrad, who he really doesn't say a lot in this movie, but he kind of doesn't really have to, because one thing I learned watching this movie over the years, and even this time for this episode, is that Jack Conrad is always surveying. He's always, kind of looking at his surroundings. He's figuring things out. And even though he is, for the most part, a representation of what us, the viewer, is watching, but I like that he's always thinking. And he, like I say, he doesn't have to say too much. When he does speak, he doesn't speak a lot, but what he says, it means, it has a meaning behind it. He's not just talking for the sake of talking, and everything. Which, I mean, as a action star from the 80s and 90s, you got that a lot with certain guys. Yeah, I mean, you had Bruce Willis, who talked a lot. Arnold Schwarzenegger, depending on the movie, he either talked a lot or he rarely had anything to say. But I would say that Jack Conrad, in a way, is similar to Arnold's character in Predator, where Dutch, he doesn't say a lot, even though he's in charge, but he is kind of the thinking man of the group. He's always processing and surveying, the surroundings and what's going on. Jack Conrad in this, it does pretty much the same thing. But he pretty much lets his fists and in some spots his boots. I mean, just like in wrestling, where Stone Cold would always say, "I'm gonna stomp a mud hole in your ass." Well, he stops a few mud holes in a few people's asses in this movie, and everything. And I mean, he is one thing about when you see Steve Austin, like when you see him wrestle and everything, he seems like normal size compared to, guys like The Undertaker, The Rock, Kane, other guys that are, pretty much bigger than him and everything. He looked normal size. But when you see him stand around normal people, Steve Austin is a large man. And if you didn't notice it in this movie, you can definitely tell it if you watch like The Expendables, if you watch The Longest Yard, where he plays a no good racist prison guard, and everything. and you see him standing around like Adam Sandler and Chris Rock and guys like that. It's like, no, Steve Austin is a large freaking man, and everything. And here, you get to see it, but he doesn't play as if he's such a large man. He plays like, just a regular dude who just happened to be a large man, and everything, which I like. And the fact that he takes no nonsense, and he just, he is trying to survive, and he really should not even be there, because the whole thing about his character is that they make up his backstory, and they pretty much force him into this. And the fact that they come up with this backstory that he's like he's a racist neo-Nazi. I think that he supposedly bombed, he pretty much bombed a black church or something like that. And it makes you wonder, like, whenever you see stories like, I wonder, did they fabricate, such and such backstory or whatever? It kind of makes you think about it, because the people that are watching, they don't know that he's not. I mean, granted, you have the whole subplot where, come to find out that Jack Conrad is actually a like former undercover, agent or whatever, that kind of got burned and left in, El Salvador or wherever they found him at and everything. But yeah, that's the whole thing, like with his character, where he's not even really supposed to be on this island, in this particular thing, because he's not who they're portraying him as and everything, which kind of makes you wonder if they didn't do that with a few of the other characters. And two of the characters in particular are the two Hispanic characters who are married, and they portray them as if they supposed to be like, the kind of wild killers, but with the way you see them when they're in this scenario and everything, it's like, are we sure that that's what maybe they did the same thing with those characters, what they did with Steve Austin character. It kind of makes you think about that. And like I say, this is one of those movies too that, going back to Austin for a second, is like, this is where he, kind of starts his run with movies. And like I say, he has a fairly decent action movie career. It's too bad that his career did not, get bigger than what it was, especially with him being the big star that he was in wrestling. He didn't make the transition to mainstream stardom in movies like Dwayne did, or like Batista, or even now how John Cena has, and everything. I just find that it was kind of interesting that his transition into acting didn't, his fame in wrestling didn't carry over into movies, is what I should say. But like I say, he still has a fairly decent B movie, action star run. And if you've seen other movies of his, like I say, no, are they the greatest movies? No, not really. But at the same time, he fits that, that late 80s, early 90s or 90s action star. And I think if he came along earlier or whatever, or if he wasn't hindered by injuries, and everything, I think he probably would have, because I remember he even said in the interview that he just kind of got tired of the grind of making movies or whatever. But it's like, I mean, he wasn't bad, and no, he didn't have to, he didn't have to go the action route, because one thing about Austin is he's very funny. He could easily just do comedy. And seeing him show up in Adam Sandler movies, I mean, Longest Yard, yeah, he's physical because they're playing football or whatever. But if you watch him in Grown Ups too, Austin is freaking hilarious, and he's like doing a lot of deadpan stuff. So, I mean, he could have easily, kind of went that route, but action movies is kind of where he made his bread and butter when he retired from wrestling and everything. But at the same time, he didn't really, I want to say he didn't really put his all into it. If that's, being fair to him or whatever, and everything. But these type of roles that he took, that, I mean, they pretty much fit him. But I will say, one movie for you guys to check out, starring Stone Cold Steve Austin, is a movie called Damage. It is very much in the same vein of, I want to say, Lionheart, and it's him and Walton Goggins. Yes, Walton Goggins. Yes, that Walton Goggins. And everything. And like I say, is it a great movie? No, but it is entertaining, and Walton Goggins is I mean, Goggins is Goggins in that movie. I believe that's also streaming also. And ironically, I actually own that movie, Damage and everything. But yeah, I mean, Austin, he's not a bad lead in this movie. He fits for what this movie was. I should say that. So let's talk about the villains, because I mean, we talked about who our hero is in this movie, but let's talk about the villain. So there's a few villains in this movie. The biggest villain would be the guy who's running this whole operation, who is pretty much, he set everything up. He's the one that's live streaming it and everything. And I'm talking about the character of Breck, and everything. He's like this, I won't say like a tech guy or whatever, but he just wants to, okay, I'm gonna do this. We don't get a full backstory on why or what was his motivation exactly, but it's like, well, this is where we're headed. This is what, things are. So I want to do this. I want to get in on the ground floor. And what better way is to pit 10 inmates, deadly inmates against each other, and who's ever left standing at the end, they get their freedom. And it's like, he has the power to do that. It's like, really, he has the power. It's like, even though he gives them their freedom, but are they really free? And everything, because they're still criminals to an extent. And the fact that he was able to even get these people out of prison, and it's like, like who exactly is this dude? Like I say, they're kind of vague when it comes to his backstory, or you can look at it as a plot hole, basically, of like how is he able to move the way he's moving, and everything. So like I say, he's the real big evil in this movie. But the villain that really gets to shine in this movie is none other than Vinnie Jones. I mean, if you watch like early Guy Ritchie movies, Vinnie Jones, he was a name, and he was, one of those movie tough guys, and everything. And you can tell that he's just having the absolute time of his life in this movie, because he gets to have all the fun. Because that's one thing about a very good villain, is someone that is clearly enjoying what they're doing, and he definitely enjoys what he's doing in this movie. And also, to kind of a thing of where I talked about a while back, a few episodes ago, I should say, about how the hero could easily be the villain and a villain could easily be the hero. Well, under different circumstances, Vinnie Jones' character of McStarley could easily be the Jack Conrad of this story. You take Jack Conrad out of this, and you kind of dial McStarley down a little bit, and he's easily the lead of this movie. But the fact that McStarley is turned up to a 20 or whatever and everything, he just bloodthirsty and just talking crazy and have no problem killing anybody. And like I say, he's having the most fun in this movie. And even though the producer, Breck, he's the true villain of the movie, but like I say, it's different levels to the villainy in the movie, because at the same time, McStarley is also on the island. He's trying to survive himself, because he has to survive. But the difference is that as the movie is going along, you realize, like, oh, he's in cahoots with the producer Breck and everything, and they're helping him. They're getting them weapons and everything. And the whole plan was, which we find out towards the end of the movie, is that the whole thing was that Breck, was going to ensure that McStarley won. Now we don't fully know why and how they made this partnership deal or whatever, but that is revealed that Breck is helping McStarley for some reason, and then of course that doesn't go to plan, and they all end up dead basically. But also too, one thing that this movie does, it does give some social commentary. Oddly enough, The Condemned does have some social commentary on what people would do to survive, and also to the things that entertain us as the viewer. Because why would people actually, and also I must add this, you had to pay to watch this. This wasn't free, or anything. You had to pay to live stream this, and everything. So they're making money off of, pitting people together against each other, I should say, for survival. And you get the whole thing of Jack Conrad's wife, who is watching, and because she didn't know what the hell happened to her husband until he pops up on this thing, and they trying to say that he's this, racist, neo-Nazi that's blowing up black churches or whatever. And it's like, what? That's not Jack. Like, wait a minute. Like, what is this? So, like I say, you do have this whole subplot, them trying to figure out where exactly is this island? How do we get to him? And they're watching, just hoping that he survives. And there are a few times where, I don't know, Jack might be, he might get the old X across his picture at some point. But I mean, there was no way they was going to take out Steve Austin, right? So it's kind of interesting, like watching the movie in 2007. Like I say, it looked like, okay, I don't think this could possibly happen. But watching this in 2025, like I said earlier, I would not be shocked. I mean, we at a point now where you got people talking about 100 men versus a gorilla and all this type of nonsense. So is this really out of the ordinary of possibility? Not so much, especially when you got the TV series like Squid Game, and everything that's around. Like I say, you still got the Hunger Game movies and everything. A few years ago, you had the movie The Hunt, which of course it all goes back to the deadliest game, which is man, all that kind of plays into this whole story as well. So like I say, the movie itself is, and like I say, I want to say that they didn't outset of like, well, we're kind of ahead of the times, but they are kind of ahead of the times if you really think about it, and everything, like I said earlier. But let's talk about the fights, choreography in this movie, because one thing about this is an action movie. There are fights. I mean, like I said earlier, you get Steve Austin getting to showcase his fighting skills. I mean, earlier in the movie when he's still locked up, because the guy that they actually wanted was like this big dude, and they almost like Attila from Lionheart, but even bigger or whatever. That's like the guy that they originally wanted, that was in the prison where Jack was, and Jack was supposed to be one of his victims, but Jack Conrad ended up taking him out. So it was like, well, okay, let's get him instead, type of deal. So like I say, you have that fight scene. Nathan Jones, who tried his hand at wrestling, but that didn't work out, but he transitioned into movies, becoming like a villain and everything. He's probably best known for being in the Mad Max universe, because he was in Fury Road, and also Furiosa, because he plays one of Morton Joe's son. He's the big muscle bound dude with the gun and the respirator or whatever. But this is one of his earlier roles also, and you get a fight scene between him and Jack and everything, and like I say, McStarley, and doing all the nonsense that he's doing. The the one guy, I want to call him Luke Hang in a way because they never say exactly what his name is in the movie, who kind of pairs up with McStarley, and they kind of, going around just terrorizing the other inmates. I mean, there's one particular scene where, like I mentioned earlier, the Hispanic couple that supposed to be like these violent criminals, but they weren't acting like violent criminals. We get this uncomfortable scene where McStarley takes this man's wife and he take her and he rapes her and everything. And then because she feels so like just, degraded or whatever, she ends up taking herself out. Unfortunately and everything. But the action is not, it's because we talk about 2007. So it does a lot of that kind of Paul Greengrass, like close up shaky cam type stuff from the Bourne movies, the Bourne sequels really, and everything. You get a lot of that in this movie. I mean, I've never been a fan of that particular style because I feel like you're too close, man, type of thing. I feel like you're too close. You can't really see what's going on, and it kind of takes away in certain aspects of a good fight scene, for the most part. I mean, but it's still effective. And in this movie, you kind of don't mind it because it is supposed to be chaotic and everything. So you kind of don't mind it so much in this movie. But at the same time, here we are, 2 decades later, and it's all like, damn, that was a phase, or whatever, where you had a lot of that close shaky cam stuff. But it kind of seems like around the time when The Equalizer and then John Wick movies came along, it's like, nah, we getting away from that type of crap. So it feels very much dated, now looking back at it, even though that's almost 20 years ago, and everything. If I had to think about something like the memorable kills, or even some, like I mentioned earlier, like the Steven Jackson one, because, and it's crazy I keep calling the dude Steven Jackson, but if you know what Steven Jackson looked like, the basketball player Steven Jackson looked like, you see this dude and everything, he looks exactly almost like what Steven Jackson looked like back then. He could be a dead ringer for Steven Jackson, basically. But the whole scene, because like what it is, you got the black dude, Steven Jackson, and this lady, they end up in this, crashed plane and everything, because he kind of hurt or whatever, and they just trying to relax, and you thinking, oh, okay, we about to get some some love making time, throwing on some Al Green, some Bear White or whatever. Like, all right, yeah, we about to do this. And then next thing you know, because the whole thing is they wear these ankle monitors that they have C4 on them. So all you have to do is pull the little pin thing and it'll go off, and next thing you know, bam, right? Because that's how they end up, dying. If they fiddle around with it, they're gonna die. If you pull somebody's, they're gonna die, right? So, they, kind of getting all cozy and everything, and then while he just relaxing and everything, all of a sudden his thing started going off, and she done disappeared. He was like, oh no, not again. And then he gets blowed up, and it's like, damn. Like, why she had to do my man like that? But I would say that's like a memorable kill. Another one probably be Nathan Jones after the fight with Steve Austin, because they rolling down this hill and you hear the thing going off, but you don't know who pin got pulled until Nathan Jones looks and is like, uh-oh, and then he ends up getting kicked down the thing, and he ends up getting blowed up. So like I say, there's a few members. The guy at the beginning who was just yelling and just a freaking maniac when he gets tossed out the plane and he gets impaled and everything, and that image of him with his hands handcuffed and him just impaled on the thing, that's another memorable kill. So there are a few memorable kills in this movie. You get like I say, you have the explosions. There's not too many like traps or anything, because it's more so just a fight for survival. So it's not really traps or anything like that. But the shaky cam, in some scenes, it adds to the chaos of what's going on. But then also, too, it kind of takes it away. And I get they were trying to go for the reality TV vibe and everything, but again, watching that back then was fine for me at least. But now watching in 2025, it feels very dated. I mean, it kind of makes you think about Battlestar Galactica, like the whole, reality camera type of thing, or The Office or Modern Family, those were documentary crews and they knew they were being followed. Where, I mean, there are a few instances where there are cameramen in camouflage that are kind of close on the scenes and everything like that. But for the most part, it's supposed to be us watching a movie, so it shouldn't be like that in a way. And I know it's a little thing of kind of nitpicky, but I mean, if you're someone who's not really into that style of, fight scenes or camera work or whatever, it does kind of get annoying after a while. So that's the only reason why I bring that up. So I've talked quite a bit about how this movie has, the little deeper messages, and was it actually intentional or were they happy accidents, and everything like that. I fully don't know, and I'm not sure if they were even trying to like say a message with it, or it's like, oh, it just happens to predict where we are now, and everything. And I don't think that Austin or any of the writers or Scott Whipper, if they've actually ever came out and said, yeah, we were, kind of looking at things in foresight and everything like that. Kind of like how Paul Verhoeven with his commentary in movies, like with Total Recall and, Starship Troopers, especially Starship Troopers. That, I mean, the commentary in that movie is off the charts, insanity. And he pretty much says no, that was the intent. RoboCop is another. All those, those three particular Paul Verhoeven movies, are riddled with social commentary, and he's talking about yeah, this is where we're leading towards. He's basically saying, yeah, this is where we're going and everything. But I'm not sure if the filmmakers here were making this movie with any of that in mind or whatever. And then also too, like I say, the whole thing of how the media sensationalize things. We're at the age now where you can turn on the news and you can see about all these violent crimes and everything. It's because that's normal. It's become normal. It's I don't think anyone is truly shocked when, this or that happens or whatever, because you kind of seeing about it all the time. Or if you just happen to be on social media and you're just scrolling or whatever, and you have these real time, videos that get uploaded of, you get these fights at Waffle House or these brawls and stuff like that, or things like that, or somebody getting shot, or just all that type of stuff. You're seeing it. So when it's talked about on the news, it's is it so much oh my God? No, it's really not. And that says more about us, really, as far as what our tolerance has become at this point. And in a way, this movie is kind of hitting on a lot of that. But like I keep saying, did they do that with the foresight of knowing that's where we were headed? Or like I say, is it all happy accident? And I think only they would be able to answer those questions. I would say this too, the way they kind of do things in the movie. I mean, it's very effective. It's not beating you over the head with anything outright. Because even McStarley, he kind of, even though he's this violent, no good character, he does have a moment where it's yeah, he's kind of, what he's doing, he know what he's doing is wrong, but he wants his freedom. And the story that he's kind of telling when it's just him and Steve Austin before Austin kills him, there is a moment where you almost have sympathy for him. Almost. Just a little bit. Like a tiny, teeny, tiny smidge of, sympathy for the man. And it's kind of interesting that they do that, because what we see of him up until that moment, you wouldn't have sympathy for him. But like I say, there's a small moment where you just might have sympathy for him. And so it's like, and like I say, it could have went either way. Jack Conrad could have easily been the villain, and the character of McStawley could have easily been the hero if they just tweaked certain things with each character, and everything. So before I get up out of here, I will say this. I will ask this question: does The Condemned hold up? I mean, you did get a sequel. We starred Randy Orton, so they kept it in the wrestling family and everything. I didn't watch that one. I think I saw maybe 5 minutes of it, and I was like, what the hell is Eric Roberts doing here? And then for some reason I just didn't watch it anymore. So I might actually check that one out just to see because they're not on an island exactly, and everything. So I say I might check that one out just for the sake of checking it out. Is this movie a product of its time, or is it low-key ahead of its time? I feel like it's a combination of both, because like I say, 2007, it was, kind of right in the middle of what reality TV was. So, okay, let's make a hyperbole, movie that's, kind of set in that same vein. But then fast forward 2 decades later, and where we are with streaming culture and everything like that, and so I feel like it's a combination of both in a way. I mean, there's no Oscar worthy performances here by no stretch, and I say the action is not super polished or anything like that. It's not like The Raid or the John Wick movies or the Equalizer type stuff, but I mean, it's good for what it is. I will say that. And then also too, I feel like this is probably one of the best WWE produced movies. And I have seen a few, because I am a wrestling fan. So I have seen a few of the WWE produced movies, even some that surprised me that were produced by WWE. Looking at you, The Call, Halle Berry in that fuzzy top wig. But at the same time, I feel like this is one of the better WWE produced movies. It is the movie that, got them up and running as far as them producing films and everything like that. Because, I mean, this is 2007 when this movie came out. No Holds Barred came out in 1989. That's a long time in between, them making movies, or producing movies, I should say. And I feel like, this movie helped, kickstart that era of WWE, studio productions or whatever, and everything. So, I mean, that's pretty much it for this episode. But before I do actually end it, for anyone who's listening, I have some questions that I will, to get some feedback on. Now, did you ever watch The Condemned back in the day? Did you see it at the movie theater? Did you see it when it came on DVD, or when it came on TV? Because it did used to play on USA quite a bit, especially Monday nights after Monday Night Raw would go off. I mean, it would come on after Raw, and things like that. So, did you watch it back then? Did you even know about this movie, I should say also? Another question I have is, what's your favorite people hunted on an island movie, or just people hunted in general? I mean, Hard Target is probably my favorite. Surviving the Game with Ice-T is another one. The Hunt is pretty freaking good, to me at least, and everything. But I would like to know, what is your favorite? What is your favorite people being hunted type movie? And the last question I will ask is, could a movie like this work now, or would it hit too close to home? And I mean, The Hunt is probably the more recent type of movie like this. Granted, it's not a reality TV type series, and we are getting a remake of The Running Man, which will be starring Glenn Powell. That's going to be coming out in the next few years, I believe, or next year, I believe. But I think The Hunt is like maybe the closest, because it has some commentary in it as well. And then also too, you get this great fight scene between Betty Gilpin and Hilary Swank towards the end of that movie. And and I actually reviewed that movie back in the day on the podcast also, and everything. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. I want to thank everyone for listening. Of course, you can hit me up on the social medias. I'm across all social medias for the most part. Wherever you are, I'm probably there also, whether it's X. You can follow the movie page, J Movie Talk, or my personal page, The J Giles. I'm over on Instagram at JMT Podcast. I'm also on Threads, also under The J Giles. You can find all of the Movie Talk episodes are part of the TV Zone Podcast Network. Whether you listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Good Pods, wherever, like I said, wherever you listen to your podcast, just type in TV Zone Podcast Network, find us like that, and everything. Also, Movie Talk is over on YouTube, so if you're on YouTube, definitely give me a follow over there as well. If you don't listen necessarily on any of the podcasting platforms, you can definitely check out the podcast on YouTube and everything. Also, I know I'm gonna save that because I have a few things in the works coming in June, which I'm looking forward to starting, that journey with, as far as expanding things with the podcast. So look forward to some new things coming to Movie Talk in June and everything like that. So that's pretty much it for this episode. I want to thank everyone again for listening to this episode, and I will be back to end and close out Mayaction Month with episode 337. So until next time, peace.